It's the intel about the next generation of Bulldogs. This is Before the Hedges, brought to you by Kroger.
Let's go, I'm a Bulldog.
Hello, DawgNation, and welcome into Before the Hedges, brought to you by Kroger. I'm Kaylee Mansell with DawgNation recruiting insider Jeff Sentell. And now that Georgia's season is over, that means Kirby Chopper season is back. And he's making a visit tomorrow. You gave us a really good piece of trivia information I think everyone else should know along with. Where's Kirby going?
So first of all, this is Chopper Intel or whatever. I didn't know this. I had to rely on Google. I'm giving it to you straight. Good people out there. My source is strictly Google. But I kind of wondered, how much does it cost? Like, first of all, what type of fuel does a helicopter require? It's actually airplane fuel, jet fuel, AV fuel. But I also learned to take a copter about 300 miles, it costs anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000. Kirby and said Kirby copter, I'm told, will be flying all around South Georgia tomorrow. Like one of the big visits will be for running back target Jay Lamar out of Colquitt County in Moultrie. And think about this, guys. So the Kirby copter, I don't know where it departs from. I don't know whether the jet catches it in Macon or whatever, but if it simply went from Athens to Moultrie and made a couple stops and then came back to Athens, it's probably about 600 miles, I would say. So that's roughly probably going to be about $2,000, $3,000. Folks, this is not economics class, but I'm saying if you can get Kirby Smart to visit key prospects in South Georgia and he can click off about 5 or 6 in an afternoon, I think that's money well spent.
If there's anything that you should take away from what Jeff just said, it's that you should believe everything that you read on the internet.
Yeah, sure.
And with that, we'll go ahead and show you what we've got going on today's episode of Before the Hedges. Starting with a new segment that we're going to do throughout the offseason, Jeff had the chance to talk to a lot of coaches at Sugar Bowl and find out what's that DNA you're looking for in those dogs that will become a part of your position groups. The first group today will be wide receivers and James Coley, and then the first of 2 junior days is going to be this weekend. So we'll show you the list and talk about why junior day is so important for the dogs. Then we've got one more recruiting resolution, and it involves a different position group. And then Mansell's Details is back, but it's going to have its own twist on it. If you want to see what it is, you're going to have to stay tuned throughout the show. But let's go ahead and start with this. This is, have you ever wondered what it takes to be a dog? This is dog DNA. I just got transported back to chemistry class, a place I never thought I wanted to be again.
I tell you what, our Cody Chaffins, every time, like, listen, he is an ace for good reason, and I'm going to contain my bragging on Cody to about 17 seconds. Every time I would get a new graphic, I sit there and I go, okay, Cody is, hit 380 on the last one, or he hit, and I'm like, can he top it? Cody just topped it again.
Every single time.
Good job.
So this season, especially in the offseason, we're going to go through different position groups and different coaches and what they had to say. But I felt it was appropriate to start at the wide receiver position because it came under so much fire this last year. And they really went all in on that 2025 class. Dog fans have mixed feelings about James Coley. But after hearing what he had to say, I see James Coley a little bit differently now. So we'll go ahead and let you hear this. This is from the Sugar Bowl on what James Coley looks for when he's recruiting a wide receiver for the Dogs.
When you look for a Georgia wide receiver, what are you looking for?
Toughness, the ability to get open, the ability to make contested catches, and then a love for the game. If you're here, you gotta be willing to work hard, right? And you gotta be willing to love this game. This just can't be a second sport for you. Because we're trying to develop guys, help win championships, and help them in their goals to be the highest draft pick they can be. So hard to do that without having those things.
How do you like looking at your class as a whole? Which boxes got checked? Which ones were the most important? Was it separation, ball skills, hands? Like, what do you think you brought in that you really needed as a group as a whole?
Yeah, so I feel that we brought the ability to get open because of the confirmed speed by these guys, right? And I felt like, I think at wide out, you got to be able to make contested catches in this league, in the SEC. And then when you play in the playoffs, the teams you're going to play in the playoffs, the coverage is going to be better. You're going to be going against NFL players. So you got to have an NFL player in your league. So I look at, is this guy going to play in the National Football League? Do I feel he has the talent to do that because he can get open, and catch the football, and have a high IQ.
So definitely this year in the 2025 class, they needed to recruit people that were able to catch the ball. That is no secret. But I think about something else that he said, that one thing we've heard the last few weeks is the culture at Georgia, the culture at Georgia. What is the culture at Georgia? And it's when he's talking about you want to recruit players that are going to get developed, come here to win championships, and also achieve their personal goals. Those three things, in my opinion, that is what the culture at Georgia is.
I mean, Kaylee, I think first of all, let me try to echo DawgNation, that slow-mo clip of Coley when he was going like this. I think they're looking at this year's class and they're going Talon Taylor, Tyler J. Williams, C.J. Wiley, Landon Roldan, Thomas Blackshear. These are guys I think that you look at them and can say they're not so much a project or Georgia's trying to do like a Dahlonega gold rush and sift through and try to find like kind of that, gold fever where they kind of had to look really hard and unearth the player. I think you look at a lot of these guys and you see NFL prospects, NFL guys. I thought it was really interesting how he said contested catches, and you've got to realize that when they make the playoffs, you're going to be going against an NFL corner, so you got to have NFL guys too. Kaylee, we always try to be nice on this show, but I don't know if you look at the Georgia 2024 receiver room and you can sit there and go, NFL guy, NFL guy, NFL guy. And I think that's the biggest thing that this class brings. And also you just kind of mentioned toughness, character, like what Coach Smart is looking for, and kind of competitive character. That's what comes around a lot. Talon Taylor had a great, you see him right there, he had a great Navy All-American Bowl. He came out of that kind of promising DawgNation that, hey, listen, if I can do anything, I'm going to catch the ball. And that was reaffirmed when I talked to his head coach there at Geneva High. I asked him, I said, 4 years, how many drops did Talon have? And he's like, man, I don't know, one, maybe, practices or whatever. So that guy right there is verified and stamped that not only is he going to catch the ball, but he's going to be about 6'1" and about 185 pounds and get open.
Coley has taken a lot of heat from the performance of the wide receivers this last season, but he didn't recruit them. It sounds here that this is his first class that he's bringing in since he's been back, and he has a very clear idea of what it is that he needs, and we're going to see the difference moving forward.
Kaylee, what did Bill Parcells used to say? He's like, don't complain about the meal when you don't let me get the groceries. Mm-hmm. Coley's went and got the groceries on this year's team, and the big catchphrase for Coley was always, change the game, change the game. Well, anybody that knows this Georgia football team, they look at this wide receiver room, Coley's room right now, and they can say he really changed the room, and Dog fans are just kind of hunkering down, dying for that.
So how does what they look for in wide receivers, in your mind, how does that tie into the types of guys that Georgia plays and recruits in general? Because we're going to hear from so many coaches, but how does Coley as a whole capture what it is that a Georgia player needs to have to thrive individually, but also within the program?
Yeah, one of the things he thought was big, Kaylee, is you have to be able to work hard. You have to be able to, there's a Georgia way of doing thing about iron sharpens iron. So, hey, you may be able to get open, you may be able to catch the ball, but if you're not working hard, then you're probably not going to have a long shelf life at Georgia. Georgia is kind of going to wear on a kid after, especially the first year when maybe they're not playing. I think the remedy for a lot of Georgia's ills is to make sure a lot of these young kids play. Not only they get seasoned, they get reps, they get better, but also they stay portal-proofed a little bit where they're getting out there on the field. And the other thing we got to talk about, Kaylee, we just talked a lot about those high school receivers. Let's be honest. The best two receivers at Georgia next year better be Noah Thomas and Zachariah Branch. Mm-hmm. Those are two guys that Georgia brought in via the portal.
That's a good point. In just a moment, we will take a look at the visitors list for Georgia's first junior day. But first, we want to remind you that here on Before the Hedges, we are always brought to you by Kroger. Some of you are still in your New Year's resolutions. Some of you want to eat better or go to the grocery store more. And there's no better time to do it than now, because you can try Kroger Boost for free for 30 days, save up to $1,000 per year, and get 2 times the fuel points, as well as free grocery delivery. And you can do that by visiting Kroger.com/boost to sign up. Again, that's Kroger.com/boost to sign up.
Speaking of getting the right groceries, you get your right groceries.
There you go.
You get them in Kroger.
I didn't even I should have put that together. That was good. I've actually never heard that before. When you said that, I was like, I'm definitely going to find a way to use that in my everyday life now. So Junior Day. So there'll be 2 Junior Days this year. The first one being this weekend, January 18th, as well as February 1st. But for those who maybe don't follow along as well, what is Junior Day and what's the importance of it?
So there's a time in the NCAA recruiting calendar. First of all, February is going to be dead, which means you can't come to campus. Georgia's coaches can't go and see you. And right now, both of those things can happen. Now, in quiet periods, coaches can't leave the campus to have contact with recruits, but the recruits can come in and visit on campus with Georgia. This is kind of both ways. And what Georgia tries to do every year, especially in January, you saw this with last year's class, they try to bring in their guys, the guys they really want, their high-profile targets, and that's kind of how you really kind of set the hook with a lot of guys, if we're using fishing terminology here. But really, it's about, listen, we want you. You're our most wanted guys for this class, and things are about to change because last year you were a year away. This year, you're up next. You're on deck. You're on now for Georgia and its recruiting, and definitely the volume on the recruiting, Kaylee, gets turned up a lot, like to 8, 9, and then when the official visits happen, they kind of go to 12 or 11 or something like that. But you see a lot of what Georgia tries to do, and they got a good blend cooking here, Kaylee, is they try to mix in a couple of their commits. Georgia only has 4, but then they also want to bring in a lot of those top targets around them.
So in just a second, we'll see the list, but is Junior Day one of those events that's so important and so impactful that a recruit can go through Junior Day and say, yep, you know what, I've seen all I need to see, I want to be a dog?
Might be. They might need to, maybe the last thing they might need to see if they've never seen a game, Kaylee, or if they've never seen the dogs practice. One of the things the dogs encourage their guys that are really feeling that they might want to rep that G is they need to say, all right, come watch us practice. You get to hear Kirby barbecue everybody. You get to hear what it's actually like. You get to see how we practice, the standard we practice at. And, if it's not for you, this is a good time for you to see it. And usually, Kaylee, let's just be honest. It's kind of a cagey, slick move. And what I mean by that is if you're visiting Athens and you're in Athens hanging out with Kirby and hanging out with Coley and hanging out with Coach Scott and Coach Dante, Coach T-Rob, Coach Shue, if you're doing that, you're not somewhere else. You're not at Alabama, kind of falling in love with Alabama, or you're not at Texas A&M or Miami or Ohio State or whatever. So in some ways, it allows you to kind of play defense on your recruits, the ones you really want, because you feel better when they're actually at home with you in Athens rather than checking out what else the world has to offer.
Well, I guess it's time to stop talking about it, and we'll go ahead and show it to you. We've got it in 2 parts. This is the first part to the Junior Day visitors list. Now, again, as I said in the beginning, there are 2. This is the first one from January 18th. You've got some in-state guys on this list between Carson All-Day Baker from Fairborn, as well as Kamari Brooks out of Watkinsville, someone I got the chance to see earlier this year. This is a really strong group to start off with. You look at them, and let me start from the bottom. Desmond Green, an interior offensive lineman. He takes all honors classes in South Carolina. Kaylee, he has a 4.4 GPA. He's also about 6'4" and 335 pounds. That's really good combo right there. Tony Forney out of Kell. Georgia just recently offered a bunch of kids at Kell. Here's an intriguing one. Chauncey Kennan. He's out of Sarasota, Florida. 24/7 Sports has him as the #1 corner in the country. He's actually a 4-star on the composite, but you have a highly touted corner coming into town. He also has Georgia in his top 5. Kamari Brooks, we're going to write about him soon on DawgNation simply because of a lot of the really cool things that David Pollock told me about Kamari Brooks. He was at North Oconee. He took over the state championship game. And, Kaylee, I gotta end with this one. I kind of planned it this way. Carson All Day Baker. You love it when a young man has a nickname like All Day. He runs a 10.6. He had 15 touchdowns last year for his program there. He used to play with Georgia's Dante Glover right there. You see there, Langston Hughes, one of those guys right there, and he runs a 10.63 in the 100, Kaylee, had 1,200 yards. It's going to be very interesting, Dogs people, to figure out kind of what the Dogs do at running back because Carson Baker just got an offer from Georgia, and he's starting to feel the love as well. So is it fair to say that on this list that Carson Baker should be Georgia's top target out of those 5? Let's take a good look at it. Let's flash back. I won't play interactive before the hedges right here. Out of these 5, I would probably say
perhaps Chauncey might be the top target simply because it's a corner. Georgia's going to need to restock with elite corners. One service has him number 1 overall. He already has Georgia in his top 5. You look at a lot of those, Desmond Green, nobody's really going to get excited about a 3-star interior offensive lineman. Kamari's also like in a lot of schools like Alabama and Tennessee as well, not just Georgia, although Georgia's turned up the heat as well. So I would probably say Kennan simply because with Baker, not that he's not a great player, Kaylee, and it should get Dog fans excited to see the volume of running backs that Georgia's bringing in. It's just that, man, there might be 4 guys Georgia takes at running back in this cycle, not just all day Baker.
We'll show you the next page of Junior Day visitors. As you said, they try to spread out the commit. So there at the bottom, you'll see that Vance Spafford, John Tavius Wyman, who are already committed to the class. Those will be the 2 that are going to be trying to plant seeds with other guys. The 4-star athlete, Ryan Mosley, 4-star defensive lineman, Bryce Perry-Wright out of Buford, someone that just even since he's been a freshman, you saw him on the field and you knew that he was built for the next level. And then we've got the 4-star edge, Dre Quinn out of Norcross. Yeah,
so Dre Quinn is at Greater Atlanta Christian. Been a while since Georgia targeted somebody out of GAC. Really strong program right there. Of course, you got Mr. Spafford, who runs the 4.35, and for the entirety of his Georgia career, he's going to catch comparisons to either Landon Roldan or Ladd McConkey because he's just so very fast. John Tavius Wyman, Kaylee, you and I are both huge fans out of John Tavius. We saw him really just rip it up his junior year. And Kaylee, this is probably going to be part of a future DawgNation story on John Tavius, but I got to see him a couple of times this year before games. And Kaylee, you've been at a lot of high school football games where everybody's out there on the field like an hour and a half before. John Tavius is out like 2 hours before, like working on routes, even in the freezing cold. I even got a story on John Tavius where they're at Olive Garden for their pregame meal, and John Tavius has the whole team huddled, or at least his position group, huddled around him to watch some film before they went to play Blessed Trinity. Ryan Mosley's out of Carrollton. He's liked the Dogs for a long time, and I think very interesting here, Kaylee, you always wondered if Georgia was really going to press for Bryce Perry-Wright because he's not 6'5" and 280. He's kind of an undersized DL that just creates a lot of havoc. But now it seems like Georgia is really starting to come after Mr. Wright as well.
There's really nothing like film as well as bottomless breadsticks and salad. That's my guy right there.
I mean, he's a corner. He's not a hog molly. He's not 350, but you sit him, and when you can break bread and watch film together as a team, you got something.
So last week, if you haven't watched it, go back, watch it, or you can listen to it on our DawgNation podcast feed. It's going to be Before the Hedges. One of the things that we spoke about was New Year's resolutions for the Dogs. If you're Georgia, these should be the 2 things that you accomplish. And we've got one more for you. And I like this one. This one is more around a position group that Georgia really needs to go heavy after, and that's the offensive tackles. You and I had a conversation before the Sugar Bowl about how confident we were in certain players to come back next year and what kind of players they would be. And someone that we all agreed on was that we thought Monroe Freeling would be one of the top guys to come back. He's coming back, but his Sugar Bowl performance was very lackluster. And he's been a consistent force all year long, but it just goes to show that that's a position group that they need to go in really heavy on. Because, I mean, look at the last couple offensive tackles they signed. Monroe Freeling was a 4-star. Jamal Merriweather, who didn't get that much playing time this year, 3-star. And then 2 of the 3 offensive tackles from 2022 class have transferred. The only one who hasn't is Drew Bobo. And so you've got to take a look at what's been lacking, what's been hurting, because you can't have a good run game without talent on the offensive line. So offensive tackle needs to be a position group that Georgia goes all in on for the class of, is this 2025 now? 2026. It's hard to keep up.
So, Kaylee, I'm going to do 2 things. Number one, I'm going to let everybody in DawgNation watching right now or on the feeds or the comment section, they should probably say amen to everything you just said right there. This is one of those. I'm gonna talk like I'm trying to talk to my kids, and I'm trying to get a really clear point in. I'm gonna talk really slow. I'm gonna talk really simply. Kaylee, this is a gotcha stat. Lean in real close on this, DawgNation. You know the last time Georgia signed a 5-star offensive tackle? 1819. Well, it was actually 2021. Amarius Mims.
Oh yeah.
Since then. And then, let's put this together, cause and effect.
I didn't go back that far. I wish I would have.
Cause and effect. You sit there and you go, okay, Georgia's having problems running the ball. Oh, Georgia is not starting any five-star offensive tackles anymore. Oh, they haven't signed one since 2021 when it was Amarius Mims in that class. Now, they've got some good ones. Like, I think the main thing is they need pure offensive tackles. And sometimes they're signing guys that played offensive tackle in high school that were pretty good, kind of like a Daniel Calhoun, who I think might even start for Georgia next year. But he played tackle, but he became a quick fit on the interior offensive line at guard, kind of like what Tate Ratledge did. And you see that kind of popping a lot right now. Monroe Freeling was signed in 2023, the Monroe you just mentioned, but he wasn't a five-star. He was a near five-star. He was like number 37, number 34 in the country. But, folks, there is a difference. And you think, well, what's the difference? Well, I can sit there and say, okay, Amarius Mims, future first-round pick. Broderick Jones, future first-round pick. So it kind of keeps going on where Georgia signed a five-star offensive lineman. You start talking about Jamari Sawyer. You start talking about even guys like Cade Mays, Isaiah Wilson. You know, those guys got on the field quick. Maybe they didn't last long, but even in Isaiah Wilson's case, that makes Kaylee laugh here, he became a first-round pick.
No, not him.
Oh,
I
Cade
always
Mays.
Forget about Cade Mays until someone randomly brings him up.
Yeah,
and it's
but
like, forgot about all of
There's
that.
just something different about five-star offensive tackles. And you want to talk about what DawgNation needs to resolve itself and what this staff, Stacey Searles is on deck here with this one, what they need to make sure happens in 2026 is they need to get more of those dudes, those guys that get off the bus and you're like, oh my gosh, that's a first-round pick. And they need to be resolved because Georgia's going after like three that are, I love the term hog molly, as you see right here. You're starting out with Jackson Cantwell out of Nixa, Missouri, the number one player in the country for some services. He's the number one tackle. You see here, Nnamdi Ogboko's little brother, Ekene Ogboko, out of South Garner High School in Garner, North Carolina. He's been to Georgia a million times to see his brother. And then this guy, Kaylee, 6'8" plus, 345 pounds. Emmanuel Ahinachanko. We talked about him last week. His dad is actually the chief of an African village. That makes him a prince. He said something very interesting, Kaylee, is he said, he just visited Texas A&M, so we know what that means. But he said during the Under All-American game, when he had arms that were measured at 86 inches, that's really long.
I'm like trying to calculate in my head how many feet that is.
Yeah, that's Shaq.
Over 7 feet. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like
that's Shaq plus about an inch. And then he said Georgia and Oregon were his number one and number two, but Oregon just kind of moved ahead. So you talk about, I'm going to say it, what does success look like for Georgia in the 2026 cycle? You better sign one of those three guys.
It's 7'2". I
did.
I had to add the little extra. Okay, so you mention Jackson Cantwell. So we're going to do Mansell's details, and this time it's going to be a little bit different because now we're in the off season, so we can't show you any highlights from guys that are committed. But the way we'll do it each week is just based on need. What's a story that Jeff and I saw that we feel like that DawgNation absolutely has to know? If there's something that we saw that we think that, oh my gosh, DawgNation might be concerned about this and we need to let you guys know, or we'll expand on somebody that we have in the top target, somebody like, not like a Tyler Atkinson or a Jerry Curtis, which you already know a lot about, but somebody that you should know. But this week does revolve around Jackson Cantwell because we just had this whole conversation about you've got to go get the five-star offensive tackle that you know is going to the next level. So Jackson Cantwell visited Georgia when they played Auburn this year. But now he's saying that he's not going to visit Georgia again until he's able to do official visits. Is that something that Georgia should be concerned about?
Yeah, normally, like this is what we said during that Junior Day block, Kaylee, is you want them on your campus. You follow the visits. I think in Jackson's case, he's got to see a lot more schools, and he's got to narrow it down. He's kind of let it be known when I'm talking to him, and I've interviewed him a few times now over the last year and a half, that Georgia's good. Like Georgia's showing him everything. Georgia's kind of setting the standard for him. And I think now, especially after he came last year, he even brought his head coach there with him. You see his dad right there. His dad was an Olympian. His mother was also an All-American in track. Shot put, discus, that's the family specialty. But Jackson just kind of feels like, hey, I've seen everything at Georgia. Everything at Georgia flashes for him. It pops for him. I think Georgia is going to be one of those in-game, end-of-the-road type contenders for Jackson. When he makes his decision, when he signs, I think he's going to have Georgia not only on his mind, but right there on the table in front of him. They're going to be one of the hats. And I think he's really going to think hard about Georgia. There's so many reasons why anybody knows Georgia track. Reese Hoffa, the Olympian and the great shot putter out of the University of Georgia, knows his dad really well. They got to know each other on the kind of the Olympic circuit, the USA International Track circuit. So every time Jackson came to Georgia, the family would kind of stay with the Hoffa family. So Georgia, Hoffa, the Dogs, I think they're in there real big. One thing to think about, Kaylee, and I know Kaylee's like, I got too much stuff to worry about right now. Sounds like you got a good question. He is already represented by the Rosenhaus agency. Drew Rosenhaus, which is one of, and I mean this in the most polite way I can for lawyers, one of the biggest sharks in terms of the agent world in the NFL. So obviously everybody's got an agent, everybody's got somebody now. Jackson Cantwell might be a can't miss, but I wouldn't caution Dog fans right now to really sweat that too much that he's not going to take any more visits until official visit season.
Would you say Georgia is his front runner right now, or is there not enough evidence to go off of?
I think it's probably right there, and I think for stretches, I think Georgia has been the front runner.
With who else?
Missouri is a school that stands out to him. Now, Kaylee, remember, Missouri can do weird things now with their NIL. If you're committed to the school in state, you can already start receiving NIL. He's been a priority. I think Oregon is a school, like all the normal schools. He just visited Texas A&M as well, along with Emmanuel Ianchanko. So, listen, it's going to be Miami's probably in there as well. It's going to be a steel cage match, Kaylee, for Jackson. But I think, what do we like to say in the recruiting industry? The Dogs are well positioned. I think Georgia's in a good spot right now.
Well, we will definitely be following along all season, and we'll give you any updates that we have. But now it is time for our question of the week. This week's, there's been a lot of talk about who's a DGD, who's not.
A lot of talk.
Lots of talk. Interpret this how you so choose. This week's question. If you had to name 4, do you think there were 4 clear DGDs on this year's team?
So obviously the DGD topic has been almost beaten to death recently, maybe even somewhat on DawgNation social platforms or whatever, DawgNation streaming platforms. But I'm of the belief, and I'll ask a quick question, I'd love to hear what you have to say. I'm of the belief that you somewhat, you somewhat dilute the term DGD if you just name everybody a DGD or something like that. So my feeling is, like, when you look at this 2024 roster and you go, are there clear DGDs on this team? And I mean, you can't DGD the whole offensive line or everything else like that. I would say this will be fun. This will be a fun improv exercise, Kaylee, because I know you're great at this. Let's do a really impromptu DGD draft. These have got to be the guys that you sit there and you go, automatically a DGD. Okay. Who would you say would be an automatic, no questions asked DGD on this team?
My number 1 pick would be Dan Jackson.
Perfect answer. I like that answer a lot. So then you sit there and you got to go. It gets tough because you're like, there's a lot of names I could pick, but I would probably say, just because what he meant to the team and how he kept the team together, I would say Jalen Walker is a DGD. I
would also go with Jalen Walker, especially after we saw him hurting them like cats in New Orleans.
Yeah, and he was really folks will never get this, but during those stretches in Georgia, against Texas, against Georgia Tech, he is literally going over the offense and saying, we're going to get your ball back. We're going to keep you plugged in. And who will ever forget the iconic thing where he's looking at the Georgia video team? Like, DGD has to have an iconic moment, right? You know, Dan Jackson pops the fumble out, right? Well, Jalen Walker, he's literally looking at the Georgia video team while Carson Beck is handing the ball off, and ETN is scoring that touchdown. And he's literally going like that. He's not even looking at the field. And then when he hears the crowd go off and everybody pop off, then he goes and he just runs onto the field. That's good.
I would also argue, and not just because I semi-know him from hometown, I would make an argument for Tate too, based on the fact that he was the overtime captain.
Yeah.
I think that says a lot about how the team viewed him, how the coaches viewed him, how the fan base viewed him. Also didn't have to come back and battled a lot of adversity with all of the injuries from the very beginning. So I would make a case for Tate Ratledge as well. Yeah,
and that's a good one, Kaylee. I would stamp that one as a really good pick too, especially because the way Tate started out, he got hurt. against Clemson and didn't play that whole Natty championship year. And then the next year he plays the whole way and starts, and he fights through injuries.
Even just think about the recruitment process.
Yeah. And then, so here's where it gets tough. 4.
Yeah.
I'm going 4, and I think there's still another clear one. I would go Malachi.
Okay, that's who I would have taken for the 4. I would have taken Malachi.
It's got to be like that, right? If you can't put 2 people that know the program and follow this team together, and you can't have consensus on 4 names, well, then they're not DGDs. So, like, you know, with Malachi, yeah, he's an All-American. Yeah, he's going to be a first-round draft pick. Yeah, he came out of Jefferson High School. But all the stuff he did, he had the plays, the interceptions. But, you know, like the one thing that I think is one of the many qualities of a DGD is, you know, do you kind of leave things better than the way you found it? And, like, look, Malachi, of all these things, he came to Georgia with Champ Bailey-like athleticism. It's verified. The numbers were there. But what he did in his community, like he was on that Good Works team all the time about reading to kids, talking to kids, boys and girls clubs and everything else like that. I mean, Malachi, I think, fits the definition. And then you sit there going, well, who else? Like, I think that
would have been my 4.
Yeah. That's what the question of the week's all about, right, Kaylee? So we challenge you, DawgNation. Did we miss anybody? Rake us over the coals. Who else do you think off this year's team should be a DGD?
Yeah, please let us know in the comments, because I'm actually really curious as to what you guys think. That we named too many? Is there a big one that it's just going way over our heads? And while you do that, go ahead and give us a like on whatever platform that you're watching, and subscribe to our DawgNation YouTube channel if you have not already. Now let's get into some top targets. With the top targets, we've got guys that we've talked about with the visitors list and with Jackson Cantwell, so we'll go ahead and take a deeper dive into some of those other guys. This is top targets. So you've got the 4-star safety, Nasir McCoy, Buford, Georgia, having KJ Bolden, safety out of Buford, flashbacks from this. And then you've got the 5-star tight end, Brock Harris out of St. George, already 1 tight end in the class of 2026, but Todd Hartley likes to go for 2. I could see him wanting to go for that 5-star tight end. Yeah,
so let me have a little intrigue in this top targets list here, Kaylee. So I like to sometimes hide Easter eggs in our shows, and this is probably something I should have said during our Junior Day segment, but I'm going to. I thought to myself, nah, let's save it for here. There's one of these top targets on this list. I'm not going to say first page or second page that I believe will be in Athens this Saturday. And it will be kind of cool to see him in Athens on Saturday. Let me just tuck that Easter egg in the middle of our show here. But tight end's going to be very interesting. We mentioned Chauncey Kennan. He's going to be in Athens for Junior Day. Carter Lucky, that's the Georgia legacy. So is Pierre Dean. That's Jared Wilson's brother. So we got a lot of guys with Georgia ties on this list. And I wonder if our Easter egg visitor would be on this list or the next one.
Wait, Easter egg, like one that we've already mentioned?
No.
One that we haven't?
One that we haven't mentioned.
Okay, okay.
We will let the world find out when the news comes out, but like, be very interesting.
All right, so you got the 4-star running back, Jay Lamar, who you spoke of, that Kirby is going to visit on his Kirby helicopter that I guess it's really expensive and has crazy fuel. Anyway, and then we've got the 5-star athlete, Derek Cooper, out of Hollywood, Florida. Yeah,
so Derek Cooper, he's a guy Crawford went down and saw last week. He saw him and his mother, Tanya, down there. 5-star athlete, Kaylee, I'm going to say this a lot because it's the quickest way I can say I'm going to get folks' attention. He could be an all-SEC safety or an all-SEC running back anywhere he wants to go. That's how good he is. Ekene Ogboko, another one that's his older brother. Ekene Ogboko, his older brother, is there as Georgia as well.
Can I make a guess?
Okay, keep going. You got to see them all? We got to see them all, though, right?
Oh, well, okay.
Caden Prothro as well out of Bowden, Georgia.
Okay, I thought that might be him because he moved up, like, a lot.
Who moved up a lot?
Caden. Devin Carter came off the list, and we moved.
Yeah, Devin Carter just committed to Auburn. It seemed like Georgia just kind of, his evaluation kind of went down after the beginning of the year. Savion Hyder, another guy that, 5-star, number 1 running back in the country. Jackson Cantwell, I guess really it's 9 out of 10 here because Kaylee, I know she pays attention in class. When I'm saying Jackson Cantwell might not visit until it's official, it might not be him, but There might be a big name show up. Of course, things can change, but there might be a big name on the top targets list that shows up in Athens this weekend.
Well, there's two big names that we have not spoken about yet, and that's the 5-star linebacker Tyler Atkinson and the 5-star quarterback Jared Curtis, who just received an offer from App State. So things are not looking good on the Georgia front.
I know people are kicking their trash can when they saw that one. They're like, oh no, that App State money. We're having too much fun here on this show, but let me tell you a little bit about Jared Curtis. Obviously, if you guys been on DawgNation.com today, I wrote a lot about Tyler Atkinson. I really tried to go as in depth as I could about whether Georgia should try and sign a guy like a linebacker like Tyler Atkinson when there's so many other needs, wide receiver, corner, quarterback in this. It's the best job we could try to do to tell you Tyler Atkinson's story. But let me tell you a little bit about Jared Curtis as well, because Mike Bobo visited him in Nashville last week, right? Mm-hmm. So they watched the semifinal with Notre Dame and Penn State together. I was told that Curtis cooked Bobo a steak. That's what he does.
Wow.
So obviously, if you're cooking somebody steak, that might mean more than a leaderboard or a top 10 list or something else like that. Here's the other thing they did. Bobo and Jared, all those guys in that, they're very competitive. Mm-hmm. So they played they shot basketball together, they played board games together, and they watched college football together. So I don't know. I like when I hear that Georgia's offensive coordinator is competing like the Dickens to beat the 5-star quarterback in anything. I kind of like that because that builds connections.
It's a very quarterback mentality thing. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at our just off the list. We've got 2 pages of this for you. Kamari Brooks
took over the state championship. He was a just off the list type guy. One of those guys that I kind of have maybe bridging both lists right now. Jordan Edmonds, he was just at the Navy All-American Bowl in San Antonio for that annual game. Word coming out about Jordan is maybe Alabama might be a team to really watch there, even more so than Georgia. Bubba Frazier is actually cousins with Georgia wide receiver signee Thomas Blackshear out of Savannah. Desmond Green, he's going to be in Athens this weekend. He's expected to be in Athens this weekend as well. So that just off the list is already populated with a lot of good names.
And we've got one more page of just off the list for you. A lot of Georgia guys, the 4-star offensive lineman, Zyke Helton out of Carrollton, as well as the 4-star athlete, Ryan Mosley out of Carrollton. And then you've got Jordan Smith, the safety out of Warner Robins. Yeah,
Houston County, Jordan Smith. Valden Sohn, he's a guy, I believe, out of Norway. He's a part of that J.J. Hene Prospects International group where they take European talented players, perhaps in other sports, and they develop them for American college football. Another name to look at right there, we have Emmanuel on there. We talked about him earlier if you caught our New Year's resolution segment about Georgia and the need for that 5-star OT in this class. But him in that 84-inch Shaquille O'Neal plus 1 or 2 inches type reach right there. Ryan Mosley, again, he's a guy that's liked Georgia for some time. I think he's feeling playing wide receiver, although a lot of scouts, a lot of folks that look at his game think he could also be a DB.
All right, and with that is Before the Hedges. Do you have any piece of intelligence for us before we go?
I think the one thing I want everybody to think about right now in this class is helicopter fuel. If you were listening to the beginning of our show, this is me tucking another Easter egg here in the back. Helicopter fuel. Who would have known that helps the big boys recruit like no one else? Helicopter fuel.
Can I ask you who you will be rooting for in the national championship?
Kaylee, it's hard.
It's hard.
You know, I don't know if we ever publicly declared, but I was going to go Texas. Because Texas was SEC, you got to represent. And people say, oh, they just got into the SEC. Well, yeah, but they also went through an SEC schedule. They went through the meat grinder, and that's what made them different, where it just means more. And then also Georgia fans could probably hang their hat on. I try to explain this to my children about, hey, who should we root for here, Dad? And I was like, well, if you're a Georgia fan, you could probably sit there and say, won the SEC, didn't win the Natty, but Georgia beat the national champion twice.
Yeah.
That was something. But now, to answer your question, I just want
You just want everybody to have a good time.
No, I can't say that. I'm not running for office with my prediction here. My father-in-law, Mike Dahl, he graduated from Notre Dame. A lot of Notre Dame fans in my family. I guess I'm just going to say Notre Dame, even though the football guy in me probably wants to say I want the best team to win, so this football playoff doesn't seem like so much of a farce. But something about Notre Dame, I think they're going to keep it closer than folks might think.
Well, we've only got a few days till we find out.
And do tell, what you got there? What's your pick? Who you rooting for? Uh-oh. We made her look at her phone.
I'm going to make this quick. So the way I see it, first off, as historically and traditionally, I do not like Notre Dame at all. I also don't like Ohio State. And there was a point that Brandon made on DawgNation Daily about, like, I guess the 98 Braves in San Diego, that, like, the Braves, even though they lost, they were going to continue to be good, and San Diego could win that one because they might not ever win another one. I view this the exact same way I view Notre Dame and Ohio State. I think I'm going to root for Notre Dame because I think this could be a one and done. For the years to come, Ohio State is always going to be a contender for it. I think Notre Dame has all the puzzle pieces in place with Riley Leonard coming in to win this one, but I don't think that they're going to continue to be a team that's always going to make a run. And for those reasons, I am going to not hate Notre Dame as much as I'm going to hate Ohio State. There we go.
Whoever you hate less, is that the one you want to win?
I guess you're picking the lesser of two evils, but because I do see Ohio State's going to have a chance at it every year just because of the talent they bring in, how much money that they have. I don't want to see them win it this first year, but they're always going to be a contender for it. So let's just dislike Notre Dame a little bit less on Monday night.
Are you standing 10 toes down on that, or you're like 8.5 toes down?
No, nobody wants to see Ohio State win.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you're Ohio State, seriously, there is no one that wants to see them win.
So one thing, I will be curious to see how Notre Dame does the revenue sharing on this, but since they're an independent, they're going to bring in, I believe, reports are somewhere 20 to 22 million.
Something crazy.
Just for themselves, and that's Ohio State's football NIL budget for this year's team, basically. So knowing Notre Dame, they'll take some of that $20 million and give it to the rowing team and give it to the lacrosse team and give it to the underwater basket weaving team or something like that in South Bend. But like they probably would not sully themselves by spending all that money on the football program.
Sounds like a terrific problem to have. All right, guys, that has been Before the Hedges, brought to you by Kroger. Thank you all so much for joining us. We'll see you right back here next Wednesday, 7 o'clock, and I never want to talk about these two national champions again.
Bulldog, so Georgia who I'm picking. I love the family atmosphere and the way they handle business. Education is important, trying to reach a next